Ready? Okay, here we go.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education for Monday, May 19th, 2025. First, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. First, we're going to review and approve the agenda for May 19th, 2025. Can I get a motion? Matt, second. Penny, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. And then we're going to approve the minutes from May 5th, 2025 as well. Can I get a motion to approve? Matt Wexler, second. Laura, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Next up, Student Spotlight, the New Canaan High School student film.
Thank you. I am thrilled tonight to introduce our two New Canaan High School students who are here for our Student Spotlight. Both Henry and Claire, who I'll talk about more in a moment, have earned the Bernice Dobkin Hall Summer Art Scholarship to study filmmaking at the Jacob Burns Center in Westchester, New York. Their dedication to the program here at the high school is why they're being honored tonight. And as you'll see in a few minutes, also the outstanding work that they develop and produce for us. So first up, I'm honored to introduce Henry Stein, who's a junior here at New Canaan High School. He's made a significant impact on the film program with his diverse skills, his unique style, and his strong writing abilities. He's a natural leader both in front of and behind the camera. And Henry seizes every opportunity to learn and to share his work, including at our annual film festivals. Henry's work, The Incident, will be shown tonight in a moment. But Henry, would you like to say anything for the board?
I just want to say thank you for having me, and this is a really this is close to me because I think this is the beginning of something a lot bigger. I think I really love being in film, and I love doing film and writing and all this stuff, and I want to be able to express my feelings and teach people like stories through different camera angles, writing, and all this kind of stuff. And I just want to give a big shout out to Miss Sinsky. Even though she's not here, she's been a great, she's given me great guidance throughout my 3 years in her class, and she's been a great teacher. And I just want to thank her for that. And yeah, here's my film, The Indent. Thank you.
Indent. Thank you, Henry. Next, I am thrilled to introduce Claire Pirelli. Claire is a graduating senior film student who has been an invaluable asset to the arts here at NCHS, contributing to film, photography, and theater throughout her time here. She actively participates in local art exhibitions and film festivals, and next year, Claire will be bringing her creativity, ingenuity, and expertise to Ithaca College. Congratulations, where she'll study film and production. Claire's work that we're going to watch now, or soon, is Curtain Call, or about New Canaan High School theater. But Claire.
Well, I also wanted to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. This movie is a documentary about the theater department. As we said, I spend a lot of my time in there as well as in the film department. And Ms. Sinsky actually really inspired me for this project. It was our self-inspired project of something we felt really connected to, and she really pushed me to showcase the side of theater that most people don't normally see. And I just wanted to shout her out as well. Like, she's been an amazing teacher for these past 4 years, and I definitely would not have the production quality that I do now or be going to Ithaca without her. But this film is really a part of what I've experienced at this school in the theater department and what I've learned from film. So, thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
I feel like I'm a part of something. And this place definitely holds many memories for not only me, but like the whole theater department. And I think that's why this place is so special for many people. It's just a place to come to.
It's really become a sort of second home to me. A lot of my friends here I see more than I see my own brother and my parents because theater is a huge time commitment. But the community that we all share in this place is one where we are all also constantly learning and growing alongside each other. There are both benefits and drawbacks to when the auditorium is empty as to when it's alive and full of people. It's kind of incomparable to the liveliness that is in this room at the time of a performance or during rehearsal or on a Saturday build session.
The theater staff here are really supportive of me, and they've taught me I have to work hard, but I will get results. And that does mean messing up a lot along the way, but also taking accountability for it, even if you don't want to. The new Canaan High School theater department, it's a weird place. It's a really weird place, but it's always here. It's always here for me. And I do really appreciate just the fact that I have somewhere to go.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Henry. And both of your works, I believe, plus others of your classmates, will be on display this Thursday night here at the high school for our film festival.
Wednesday.
Oh, is it Wednesday? Oh, I'm glad you told me. I would have been very, very lonely here on Thursday. On Wednesday, thank you. What time, do you know the time?
Well, red carpet opens at 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
The film festival starts at 7.
Beautiful. Okay. Catch the red carpet. 6:30 Wednesday, if we can make it. Fabulous. And I did hear from Ms. Sinsky. She was very disappointed she couldn't be here. She has another commitment that she couldn't change. But certainly we see why she selected the two of you to come and show some of the work that you're producing in the video production class and what you're putting together. And thank you for being here, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Henry and Claire. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Is there anyone who'd like to approach the board? Seeing no one, we're going to move on to reports and recognition, and that's a curriculum update first from Dr. Carenti.
Well, that's certainly a tough act to follow, I have to say, as we're getting more and more into our student presentations. It certainly makes our presentations a little bit more challenging to present, although I do have to say the film class is a big part of what we do here at New Canaan High School. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that design process of curriculum, because there is curriculum for our film class, which allows our students to produce what they've produced and shared with you tonight. So certainly it is a privilege to be here tonight presenting on the design and purpose of curriculum. And we are so fortunate to have such a wonderful group of professionals helping to lead our district. They are certainly experts in content, and they're actively involved at the state, local, and national level. And we have many of our leaders here this evening. I do want to just take a moment. I know many of you have had introductions with them as they've done presentations, but since I got such that wonderful applause, I do want to let you all know who is here this evening. We have Kathy Grimes. We have Karen Scalzo, maybe a little wave, that would be great. Sarah Bross, Jen DePonte, Melinda Meyer, Mary Hanna, Susan Bliss, Ashley Tremblay, Evan Remley, Rebecca Pavia, Michael Forsucci, Michael LeDuc, Jim Zambarano, Michelle Ludala, Cynthia Rivera, Kemen Hawley, Matt Salvestrini. Nope, Matt's not here, sorry. He would like to have been here, but he was here last board meeting. Laura Newell, and Kristen Kleiss. So thank you for coming this evening. They collaborate regularly with professionals in other districts at the university level. They design professional learning for our staff, and certainly they are at the heart of what we do when it comes to curriculum writing, which you will see momentarily. Although they're not presenting, I'm here on their behalf this evening, and they are available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. All right. They're all looking at me, really? So what is Understanding by Design, UBD? In order to discuss curriculum, we must first understand what it is and how it is designed. You may have heard the term UBD, or Understanding by Design. UBD is a framework developed by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTide, two experts in the field of education. And the framework is a tool used to plan curriculum, assessment, and instruction. Why do we use UBD? We've used UBD for many years. The framework is important for the following reasons. The framework helps us to focus curriculum and instruction on the development and deepening of student understanding. The backward design allows us to start with the desired results. It also helps avoid common problems of treating a textbook as curriculum versus a resource. The design helps teachers focus on ensuring learning happens, not just assuming what was taught was learned. And the UBD framework reflects a continual improvement approach to student achievement and to teacher craft. There are 3 stages in the framework. Stage 1 is the identified desired results. Stage 2 is determined how the desired results will be assessed. And stage 3 is the plan for instruction. All 3 stages must be clearly aligned. The stage 1, content and understanding, must be what is assessed in stage 2 and what must be taught in stage 3. So where do we begin? We start with people. We must have highly qualified staff who are experts not only in content, but instruction. Many of those people sitting to the right of me are the experts in content and instruction. All staff must understand UBD. Professional learning is provided regularly for both the designers and for the users. Next, we examine all national and state standards, and every content area has standards. So when you're looking at our UBDs, it goes directly to the Connecticut Core Standards, our Next Generation Science Standards, our National Art Standards, our Social Studies, Health, Education, our American Council of Teaching and Foreign Languages. The frameworks consist of domains and standards that need to be taught. For example, in second grade, there are 4 domains in math. Each domain has multiple standards. So for example, up there, you'll be looking at 2OA.2. That means grade 2. It's a standard that sits in the domain of operations and algebraic thinking, and it's the second standard within that domain. The next example is also grade 2. It sits within the numbers and operations in base 10, and it's the 5th standard in numbers and base operations in 10 for grade 2. In order to instruct our students, teachers must have a deep understanding of the standards. Educators spend hours unpacking standards so they know, so they understand what students need to know and be able to do. So stage 1 is our desired outcomes, as you may recall. This is the blank slate that we start with our UBD. All units begin with the title of the unit, the course in which it exists, the curriculum area, the grade level, the time frame, and then a brief overview of that unit of study. Stage 1 consists of all the standards to be taught within that unit. So all of the standards are listed in the left-hand column of a unit of study. We then have what we call a transfer goal, and this is how the students will apply what they've learned in other areas. The meaning part of our stage 1 is our enduring understandings and our essential questions. So we want to know what students will understand, and then we want to know what students will consider. And the last part of stage 1 is our acquisition. The acquisition is directly aligned to our standards, and it's what students will know and what students will be able to do. So I took an example of a second grade social studies unit of study, and I'm going to walk us through each of the stages of the social studies unit so that you have a deeper understanding of how our units of study are written. So at the top, you'll see the second grade example. This is a social studies unit on Connecticut, which takes place from August to November. And we begin with our dimensions in social studies. So unlike domains in math, social studies has 4 dimensions. So they have developing questions, they have applying disciplinary concepts and tools, which is like their civics, geography, history, economics. They have evaluating sources, and then they have communicating conclusions. And then within each of those dimensions are a set of standards. So once again, you would see the little code of the inquiry, you would see the second grade, and then you'd see that standard that's been listed. In this case, we have a transfer goal, so we're asking students to participate as active and responsible students in their communities, and that's the transfer goal. And then you'll see the enduring understandings and the essential questions. So we're looking that students have an understanding that states have geographic, cultural, social, economic, and political identities. You'll see what some of the enduring questions are, what makes a state a good place to live and to work. And then we move into what we call our acquisition. The acquisition is where it's aligned directly to the standards. So as you'll begin to see, you'll see the standards listed in the left-hand column, but then you'll move over into the other columns where you'll want what the students will be able to know, and those are the standards that are listed there, and then what the students will be able to do. And so in each of those standards, we're looking for students. So they might be asked to construct an argument with reasons as to why Connecticut's a great place to live, what makes it a great place to live, what would draw people to visit Connecticut. We then move into stage 2 of our UBD. So remember, stage 2 is our assessment. So we start with our desired outcomes, that's our standards, that's what we're asking students to know, that's what we're asking students to be able to do. We then move into our assessment. So we need to understand how are we going to assess our students on these standards. And we need to have a really clear plan of what that assessment is. So this is all happening before we even begin to do our instruction. So the teachers need to have a clear understanding, what are they going to be teaching in those standards, how are they going to assess the students before they even get to the instruction. The assessment is the stage 2, and we often use GRASP, which is an acronym for Goal, Role, Audience, Situation, Product, and Standard. And we also use the depth of knowledge. The depth of knowledge is a level of questioning that we use on our assessments. So it's very similar to Bloom's taxonomy, where you're looking for a variety of different assessment questions. There may be questions that are a recall. There may be questions that apply skills and concepts. Then we're moving into strategic thinking, and then we're thinking about that extended thinking. Where are they doing that investigation, that complex reasoning, that planning? So what you saw tonight is a performance-based assessment. So that's really at that high level of their extended thinking that they presented to you. They took all that they've learned and they've applied it, and now they're presenting it to you. So here's the example of the assessment that goes along with our second graders unit in Connecticut. You're an expert on Connecticut, and you've been asked to help the government advertise about our state. Why is it a good place to live, to work, to visit? You can create a video, a news conference, or a brochure to support your ideas with reasons and details. So at the end of the unit of study, this is what we're asking our students to do. And then we move into our stage 3. And then stage 3 is really that learning plan. This is now what the teachers are going to be instructing the students in. And how will we instruct our learners and prepare them to transfer their learning? We teaching kids how to think, not what to think. That's our job. We are teaching critical thinking skills to analyze, synthesize, evaluate, and that's our primary goal in this learning stage. Differentiation of instruction is at the heart of the learning stage. This is stage 3. We use that term differentiation quite a bit as educators. And as a teacher, it would be great if we could all just stay on that yellow path and just kind of keep moving forward. But unfortunately, the learners in our classroom, they learn all over the place. And we can never predict how our students that are sitting in front of us are going to learn. They learn very differently. They learn very differently in each of their content areas. They even learn differently from unit to unit based on background information, based on areas that they're feeling very comfortable in. So it's the teacher's responsibility to meet the individual needs of all those students within their classroom so that the desired outcomes are met. And stage 3 is really where all the magic and the creativity happens with that teacher. They work so hard to get the students to meet those desired outcomes. So certainly, here's an example, once again, walking us through that unit of study on Connecticut. And stage 3 will vary on the age of the learner and the content. The social studies units in the elementary schools are very detailed. As you can imagine, planning for second grade teacher can become quite consuming as they plan for the teaching of reading, the teaching of writing, the teaching of math, science, and social studies. So we want our second grade teachers to spend as much time as possible in those 3 core areas because that's where a lot of the differentiation is going to need to take place to get the students to be mathematicians and writers and readers. And so we do provide more developed stage 3 in social studies and science for our elementary teachers. You would probably not see as well of a developed plan as you move into the high school or the middle school. They're developed, but they're certainly not as developed as the social studies one because of the grade level in which they're teaching. So throughout the unit of study, the students are here going to be taking a bus trip, and they're going to learn about the geography and the government and the history, the industry, the innovation, the arts, and the culture of Connecticut. They're going to be learning about what makes Connecticut a good place to live, to work, what gives its state identity, how does our state government provide for the needs of the citizen, and how can people make a difference in their community. Our units of study have embedded links for the teachers so they can examine lessons, assessments, and resources along the way. If you look at each of these are actually lessons that the teachers will do with their classes. And they certainly have the creativity and the flexibility to move along at the pace of the students, but this is a great guide for them to utilize. And so it also helps for us to have that assured experience across second grade, across the district. We also have just another feature of our UBDs, and these are just called additional unit features. And this is where we have extra resources. So sometimes when a teacher is developing their UBD, they might decide that they need to have misconceptions, especially when you're talking about science or math. What might be misconceptions as students are learning this area of mathematics? Or they might have vocabulary. What's some of the academic vocabulary that they need to know in order to be successful in this unit of study? They usually have connections to ICT. So what are some of the technologies that they'll need to learn within this unit of study? There's always connections to SAPL. And then there's also resources. What might be some extra resources that we might use for a student who is multilingual or who is a student who's special education? So what might be some extra resources that we have available for those students? And here's just an example, once again, playing out that unit of study on Connecticut and giving you an idea of what some of the vocabulary, how it integrates in with ICT, how it integrates in with SAPL, and then certainly some suggested resources that the second grade teachers might need. Certainly as you move into the suggested resources, we often have times where it might be an opportunity for teachers to learn more about a content area. So especially when we're doing new units of study and it might be an area that they are not, they don't have as much knowledge about, some of those resources are embedded in there for the teachers to learn more about a particular area of study. For example, if they're studying a continent such as Africa in 4th grade, there might be resources there for the teacher to learn more about the continent so that they're feeling better prepared with their classes. So what I just shared with you is just one unit of study. So as you look at the curriculum, the units of study make up the curriculum for a grade level or course. So for example, in 2nd grade, there are 4 units of study in social studies. There's 8 units of study in math. There's 7 units of study in reading, and so on. So each of these units of study make up the course. So it might be at high school, it might be the algebra course, or it might be French in the middle school, or it might be social studies in 2nd grade. And each of these units is what makes up the curriculum for the course in which the teachers are going to be teaching. So certainly the role of the Curriculum Leadership Council, their job is to recommend, develop, review, and approve the curriculum. Oftentimes, we're driven by new or national or state standards that are developed in a particular area. And so it's our responsibility to have a deep understanding of what those standards are asking our students to be able to do. And then we oftentimes need to collaborate with other teachers in that field to develop the curriculum and have a better understanding of how we're going to go about teaching those standards. And then we always come together as a group to review the curriculum, and we serve as critical friends along the way. And we ask difficult questions of one another about the standards. We ask difficult questions about the essential questions. We ask questions about the assessments and how the assessments are linked back to the unit of study. Oftentimes, we're even looking at the resources and making sure that the resources will meet all the learners within a classroom, that we don't just have resources that are at such a high level that other students that may not be reading at that same high level can have access to. So we're always looking at what's the level of those resources within a classroom. We do have a tool that we use when we're evaluating our curriculum when it comes in front of the CLC. So we have a rubric that we apply, that we go through each of the stages and have conversations and discussions. It doesn't always go back. Sometimes they're going back and they're getting feedback. Sometimes they come halfway through to ask feedback, and then the CLC will give them feedback, and then they'll continue their work on it. So we follow a protocol, which gives opportunities for both the presenter and the audience to listen, to gather feedback, to take notes, to go back and reproduce the curriculum. So certainly, the Curriculum Leadership Council, their responsibility is they present oftentimes to the Board of Ed and to parents. Many of the presentations we do here at the Board of Ed are driven by our district goals. Usually our district goals are driven by changes in our standards. So you may have recalled we had computer science, which is still part of our district goals because there were computer science standards that came out. So that was part of some of the curriculum work that the teachers would be working on. And then certainly you'll see it over time. It's not usually just something that happens overnight. So like when we went through our transition with our health curriculum or our science curriculum and adjusting to all those next generation science standards, you'll see that phased in over a period of time. Sometimes it could take up to 5 years as you're developing and you're changing your curriculum and adjusting to new standards that have been presented. We do our best to keep our district website up to date. It's a place where you can find old presentations of stage 1 of our UBDs. The full UBDs are not on the website because many of them have hyperlinks. All of them have our assessments in them. So you could imagine if that got out, a high school student might have lots of fun with looking at our assessments prior to even taking the course. So we do just put that stage 1, which is really that desired outcome. It's what's the overview of the unit of study, it's the standards, it's the essential questions, it's our enduring understandings, it's that transfer goal. And we have multiple places where you can find the curriculum on the district website as well as the presentations to the Board of Ed. We communicate with parents, especially when legislative mandates are involved. And this is just the example that goes out yearly from the health teachers. So we do have a presentation on health K-5 every year, and it does address the legislation mandate on assault and abuse prevention awareness. It gives parents an opportunity to come, take a look at the lessons that we'll be doing in that area, as well as all of our health curriculum. And so usually, as we've gotten into the presenting every year, we usually find it's mainly primary grade parents that are coming now at this point just to learn about it, but it's there and open to all of them. We also communicate through newsletters, or we will send out letters to parents about upcoming unit of study. And then here's just some few examples of the ongoing work. We do know that we have some new K through 12 Connecticut social studies standards that have just been recently revised and released, and so we're looking to make sure that we're aligned to those standards. We are continuing to work on our alignment to the National Core Art Standards. So I think you may recall a few years back, we did a presentation of where we were with art, but we also need to now circle back to say where are we with music curriculum. We're continuing to make sure we're aligned to the science of reading, K3, and then we're continuing our alignment to the computer science standards. Just a few of the examples that will be happening mainly during the summertime. This is where they get a good bulk of the work, so that we will have people that will work those last 2 weeks of June, and then they'll move into July. But the work is ongoing throughout the course of the year as well. And we usually try to get teachers to work with them, once again, trying to train them to have a deep understanding of how we design our curriculum and how to present our curriculum. So I will be happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Carenti. Any questions? Matt?
None? Oh, you want me to sit down?
Thank you very much, Dr. Carenti. I appreciate that. I've actually have quite a few questions, just because of my ignorance, I guess. One, just as a baseline, we compare these to sort of, you mentioned, I think, stage 1 is sort of laying out the standards, right? A lot of the state and different minimum standards. Do we set standards that are beyond the state minimums? I mean, I know I've talked to a lot of parents who, when they say your student meets the minimum requirement for the state of Connecticut, they're like, wow, I'm not here in New Canaan for the minimum requirement for the state of Connecticut, right? So to what extent do our standards exceed what the state minimums are?
So the standards are pretty in-depth, and we have that flexibility in stage 3 of our UBD to really differentiate the instruction and extend students beyond those standards. So oftentimes, for example, in the area of math, you might have students that might jump up into a 5th grade standard, or they might dive more deeply into a 4th grade standard. So we never seem to run out of material to do with our kids. The standards are pretty in-depth. And even when we do our assessments, the students aren't tested on every single standard. They're tested on, some primary standards that they have. But that's really that stage 3 is where we can differentiate up for the students.
But at stage 1, the desired result is minimum standard, and then we flex in stage 3, is that?
That's correct. So
Okay.
stage 1 is the desired outcome. And so that is going to be driven by those lists of standards. And as you can see, the standards for that one social studies unit are pretty comprehensive. And so you could probably imagine not all students are going to master every single standard that are listed within that unit of study. Usually the teachers will identify what we call primary standards. So there might be 3 to 4 standards that are going to get mastery in that unit of study. But then there's also secondary standards that help us to expand what we're doing. So we certainly can use different material to help differentiate those standards and to bring it to different levels.
And in the case of elementary school, for example, the stage 3, which is, I think, the learning plan, right? So is that applied district-wide for that grade? For example, 2nd grade, you gave this example. This would be true for my 2nd grader in South or Julie's 2nd grader in West?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And then I guess, how closely do the teachers follow that learning plan, and who audits their adherence to the learning plan, right? Because I've heard from parents sometimes, well, oh, my child didn't cover that, or their peer in a different classroom covered that. And so who monitors that adherence, and how closely are they required to follow that?
So we work really hard with all of our teachers to make sure that the UBD is followed and make sure that they're meeting the learning plan. We have people that do walkthroughs in our classrooms. So if you're talking about social studies, it's not unusual to find Mary Hannah popping into your 2nd grade social studies classroom during your social studies block of time to see what's going on and to help teachers plan for that unit of study. We spend time unpacking units of study. So at the elementary level, we have common planning time. So that means that all 2nd graders actually have their specials at the same time throughout the day, which allows us to pull all 2nd grade teachers across the district for Zoom. And so it's not unusual to have our coordinators leading, maybe unpacking a unit of study. So Kathy Grimes might be unpacking a reading study, or Jen DePonte might be unpacking a math study. We have reading and writing and math specialists in buildings that help to follow as well. And then certainly we have our principals and assistant principals that follow up.
Okay. And is there, I guess, within the learning plan, are there options? Because we've heard a lot about whether it's about in the English department, right? In high school, some teachers select certain books, others select others, right? When does the teacher discretion, when does that come into play? Is that throughout K through 12? Is that only in high school? Does the learning plan allow for some teacher discretion? If so, how much?
So there is flexibility within that learning plan. I gave you an example of social studies just because it's very well developed. But as you move into the mathematics, there might be certain resources that you'll use to teach certain concepts within your classroom. But you also have to remember that you have to adjust based on the learners that are sitting in front of you, because you could have students who already know the concept. So then that resource that you might have chosen to use for that math lesson a year ago may not be necessarily appropriate for the class that's sitting in front of you this year, because you have a different group of learners. We do have flexibility with books that we utilize K-12 in our curriculum. So there's some suggestions that teachers can pick off of that list. And we do have a book process that we follow where we actually sit and review books that are part of the curriculum.
Okay, great. And then last question, just as a way of update, you mentioned the computer science requirements. That's something I'm really focused on. I mean, what's the latest there, and how close are we to perhaps creating a programming requirement, or at least some exposure to programming for our students?
So we've been working on that throughout the course of the year. I think Mr. Salvastrini's gotten a little sidetracked with AI, and so we're getting back on path over the summertime, really taking a look at where we are, where the gaps are, and how we can expand that out. And so we're at a process right now. I think we're right on par with what the district goal says, where we're identified what the gap areas are. We've begun some of the writing. I think we're at a further along in our elementary computer science because we have our ICT people, whether it's through our librarians or our technology integrators, doing some of that instruction. We run into some gap areas in the middle school because the kids don't have a special in technology. So we're trying to figure out how's the best way to integrate that, to keep that continuity going for that vertical alignment, K-8. And then, once again, it's looking at the courses that we're offering at the high school.
And so I guess, just to not let you get off that easily, so for programming specifically, I mean, how far are we from coming to or developing a solution that could roll this out and give more kids exposure, right? I mean, obviously it sounds like it's not going to happen 25, 26. Realistically, is this a 26, 27? I mean, when could this
I think
happen?
the phase that we're really looking at right now is at 5-8. I think I would say that we're in a really good place K4 with what we've identified for those standards and how we've integrated those standards. And now it's really trying to look at 5-8. We've run into some scheduling issues 5-8 because of just the way the building is designed and how the schedule exists for the 5-8. We try to capture some of those computer standards in our STEM classes. We try to capture some of them in science, but we know that we need to make sure there's assured experiences for all 5/8. So I would like to look more toward, we just had a conversation on Friday about the scheduling over at Saks. And then I think that we would be able to try to pilot some more areas of the computer science.
Okay, so,
I would guess we'd probably be in a better place for 27.
okay, perfect.
I think we need another year of planning and really trying to figure out how we can integrate them best.
Great, thank you very much.
Matt Wexler?
So going back to the flexibility and latitude that the teachers get as we move through the grades, there are some studies like math, right, that is finite. You know, I learn the quadratic equation or I don't, right? There are other subjects that are probably more subjective or have wider viewpoints, right? It's like civics, for instance, or history. How do we track those, the flexibility back to the ultimate goals of not just the district, but also just the community at large, and making sure that we are teaching I don't say the right viewpoints because there's many viewpoints, but the proper way or the broadest viewpoints and teaching them how to learn, right? As you said, how to learn, not what to learn, and making sure that that's following through into the classroom.
So I can't think of a social studies example off the top of my head, but once again, there are standards that drive what we teach. So there's standards that we use when we're teaching world history. There's standards that we use when we're teaching U.S. history. And so we follow those standards, and we assure that the teachers stick with those standards. And I think it's important that the students have different viewpoints.
Of course. But so I'm in part of my ignorance. Can you define standard?
So the standard is the framework that's been designed. So when
Sure,
you look at the
UBD. Yeah.
Yep. So when you that's the framework. So the standards are bringing us back to when you look at the example that I gave to you on the slide that has.
Is it where do we begin?
Yep. But go to the next one.
The next.
Connecticut Core
Sure.
Standards for math.
Okay.
So what you'll see here, this is just examples.
Sure.
And what we have are large documents that you could actually go onto the state of Connecticut. You could type in Math Common Core, and all of the standards for the Common Core would come up. And what you'll see is each of the grade levels have domains that they'll be in, and then within each of those domains are a set of standards.
Okay.
So for example, the standard right now is if you look over to the right-hand side, it's saying fluently add and subtract within 20 using mental strategies. By the end of second grade, know from memory all sums of two one-digit numbers. So that's a standard that we would expect all second graders to know by the end of the year. Within that operational algebraic thinking, there could be 10, 12, 15 standards. The same would hold true for numbers and operations in base 10. Once again, just an example of what the standard is. So the standard is fluently add and subtract within 100 using strategies based on place value. So all of the standards that's how they're written. They're really prescribed as to what students need to know at each of those grade levels. And that's how we drive our curriculum. So you would see a 7th grade math standard or 7th grade social studies standard, 7th grade science standard. Those are what drive what students need to learn at 7th grade.
And so, as we get, again, focusing more on the subjective courses versus the objective, right? Putting math aside, focusing on social studies, history, what have you. Within the standards, there's still, I guess, what I would say flexibility, right? With how, again, I have to go read through what a high school civics class standard would be. Mm-hmm. But there's still flexibility in terms of how those are taught, right? As long as they're adhering to the what seem to be broad standards that would be laid out, correct?
So you have I think it's the acquisition that actually drives how they go about learning those standards.
Okay.
So when you look at the acquisition, which is all part of that stage 1, you'll see the standards and you'll see that alignment to that acquisition. So it's very specific when you look at the acquisition, where it will say, our identity is made up of attributes such as geography, history. And then that's what the students will know. And then what the students will be able to do with that is, they're going to locate and identify physical features and what they look like on a map. Yeah. That's something good that we would want all second graders to be able to do.
For sure.
We want them to be able to identify and use those features on maps. So you could see that that's the geography part of the standards. And that is really how it's designed all the way up. So we have standards that are K-5, and then the standards shift 6-12. And then there's standards for 6-12 that drive. I think probably the one area that got probably a little bit more complicated when we had to write curriculum for was science, because it's the next generation science standards, we really had to pull them apart and say what were ones that had to go into geophysics, what were standards that had to go into biology, what were standards that had to go into chemistry, what were standards that had to go into physics. Okay. And so it was really determining those units of study based on those standards, and in addition to some other biology content that they would need to learn.
Sure. Okay.
So when you look at the social studies standards for 6-12, you would see those just as established. They would just obviously be more complex that you would be asking students. And we have them in English language arts. We have them in mathematics.
Okay.
So when I gave an example of second grade, but you could have pulled any of the units of study K-12.
No, of course. I was looking, as you had mentioned, there's more latitude as you go higher up in the grades, which makes sense. Wanting to see just where does that latitude start and stop with regard to how the kids in the classroom are being taught versus the perhaps again like subjective nature of some of the course load.
Right. I mean, we'd be happy to share a 9-12 social studies unit of study with you.
Great.
So that you can have an understanding of how each of those stages work.
Great.
And you'll see, that once again, the social studies teachers also have to adjust based on what the students are coming in with and what they know and are able to do.
Okay, excellent.
Penny?
So, as I understand it, all students in a particular curriculum grade and course will want to get to the same desired outcomes that are set by the UBD. Mm-hmm. Can you just discuss a little bit more, how you use the assessments to see how the teachers are doing with that, and like who's doing particularly well and who has an innovative way or whatever? Because we get the statewide test, but we don't, as the Board of Ed, really see the individual assessments, which I know also help inform and make your curriculum richer.
Right. So along the way, as you'll look in, you'll see the big performance task in a UBD. Sometimes it's one performance task, sometimes it's multiple performance tasks, depending on the grade level. You'll also see assessments along the way. So that's where the teachers will use those assessments to determine if the kids are learning the content. And then they use those assessments to determine if they have to differentiate the instruction. So we have obviously formative assessments. So every single day, teachers are assessing kids. They might have them do a quick exit slip, or they might have them do something for homework to see if they've learned the concept that they've taught in class. Or they might give them a quiz along the way before they get to their end of unit assessment. So the goal is to get all the kids to that desired outcome. It's how you go about getting them to that desired outcome. And so the teachers have to be flexible. They have to use that assessment. They have to analyze that assessment to determine what they need to be teaching in class. They just can't assume that all the kids understand the multiplication facts. They can't assume that all the kids understand all the different text features in a book. They have to go about assessing the kids. So do I have specific examples off the top of my head? I don't. If any of you have a specific example that you'd like to share, happy to bring somebody up. We're all being very quiet and shy.
Yeah, my gosh.
But there is a variety of assessments that the teachers use, and they're often very creative.
And
Oh, thank you. And then I think you'll recall from the RTI presentation that I did in the past, the response to intervention about USTs. So that's our universal screening team that comes together and they look at data. So it might be looking at a performance that they did in the area of reading, and now they're coming together 2 to 3 times a year. They're analyzing how every student did in the class. Usually the coordinators or department chairs are running those USTs. They're making sure that the kids are making progress, and the kids that aren't making progress are the ones that we might be doing some type of intervention with. And so that occurs K-12, and that might be with an English portfolio, where they're at the high school and they're looking at something that they just all have written as sophomores, and now they're coming together and they've been scored, and now they're analyzing them and having conversations. Or it might be a unit benchmark assessment that they've done in the area of math, which might be accumulation of 3 units of study. So we've learned 3 of our units, and then in December, we're doing a benchmark assessment to see how the kids have retained that information. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then, I mean, I just have one other really general question, but it's always interesting to me how you can have the same material, you have the same desired result outcome that you want for your students, and then, you know, in a particular year, your students change, so you have to change how you teach. And so I would just love to hear a concrete example of that. I don't know if that happens more in elementary school, or if, I mean, you said it's K through 12, but just like how when you have the same in English or math, you have the exact same material, how you would teach it differently depending upon, you know, what students were in your class that year.
Anyone want to give an example?
What was the question again?
They're
You weren't-
looking for an
everyone else is
example
wondering the same thing.
Of how you might be teaching one concept, recognizing that there's kids in your classroom that aren't understanding the concept, and how do you go about differentiating? Michael, you want to come on up? All right. So this is Michael Fersucci, for those of you that don't remember, who is our department chair of social studies at the high school.
Hello. Several of the questions kind of had to do with the social studies realm, so I might try to tie them all in if possible. As far as the standards go in the social studies, they're mostly referring to the skills of social studies as opposed to the content. So those skills would, at a baseline level, be reading comprehension, which is how you access history, right? Ultimately, it comes down to reading, maybe less and less so as digital technology is rising, but we're holding on to the literacy bit. Up next would be critical thinking, making sense of what you're reading, understanding the intent of the author, and then, if possible, critiquing it, maybe challenging it in some way. And I think that's where we can hit multiple ability levels. A specific example of that would be the French Revolution. It's a typical topic that we always teach. It's a kind of a cornerstone of our, Western history understanding. And the traditional way of teaching it is that it's the introduction of the nation state, the move from monarchs and subjects to governments which generally represent the nation. Now, the textbook teaches that basic continuum. So our first goal is for students to understand the importance of that switch of a government which is meant to represent the people as opposed to a government which, has rulers and those who are ruled. For those students that do excel in the social studies and can understand more challenging concepts, we can then dig into those ideas a little bit more deeply, because of course history is always evolving. Recent research regarding the French Revolution and regarding the idea of the nation state is that this is more of a kind of a foundation myth, that these were actually empires at the time. And our more advanced students can dig more deeply into content in that regard while still holding the baseline standards. Again, those more skill-based standards. How we assess that, we have benchmarks that we've been working on. Classes, our core classes, take one at the beginning of the year and one not exactly at the end of the year. We do it in March. We decided March is when they're kind of at their peak and the end of the year kind of drag doesn't kick in yet. Those benchmarks are really skill-based. They don't rely on content knowledge. So the example that our freshmen come in and the benchmark assessment has to do with an idea of geographic determinism. So they read a secondary source, a one-page, 9th grade level secondary source, which introduces this concept of geographic determinism. They answer several multiple choice questions, which are very much aligned with how SAT question works, AP questions work. It's more, can you read this text, make sense of the author's point, their claims, the evidence they're using to support those claims. Up next in the assessment will be a primary source. In this case, I think we have Herodotus. I don't know if you guys remember your history. Herodotus, one of the first Greek historians, talking about the Egyptians and saying they're so unique because of their river. The Nile is unique, and as a result, their Egyptian culture is unique. So the idea would be, can they now connect this idea of geographic determinism to a primary historical source and understand that that's kind of the theory that's being communicated, even if not explicitly. There's several more sources, short sources, which all follow those same themes, and the questions really rely on, can the kids make sense of that initial concept and then apply it in different ways, whether they be primary sources, non-textual sources, etc. Those benchmarks loosely follow the curriculum, but again, they don't rely on content knowledge. A student with no knowledge of geographic determinism, but with strong reading skills, critical thinking skills, and writing and communication skills can make sense of it, or they can't. And that's how we kind of determine the degree to which we focus on the baseline skills versus the more advanced ones with students. Right, so differentiation, again, going back to my French Revolution example, for those students who maybe, shockingly, history might not be their favorite subject, we're gonna focus on that baseline story that's told. French Revolution is one of the first examples of the nation state. The nation state is our primary way of, organizing our world. For those students that make quick work of that knowledge, we're able to offer them additional opportunities that will allow them to dig a bit more deeply into it. And those students that are still working on the baseline concepts can still work through the assessments, can still do the work well, but those students who are excelling for whatever reason have the opportunity to kind of push themselves in that direction by looking at, more recent scholarship. We'll often ask students to try to find perhaps flaws in what the textbook has to say, maybe dig more deeply, using other resources to find where, the textbook, by definition, a textbook is all of history in one book, right? So it's generalized, and when you generalize it, it becomes less accurate. So we can give students opportunities to look at more advanced scholarship and hopefully think more critically about it.
Erica?
So something that Penny, thank you for coming in for the CLC presentation. Something that Penny touched on earlier around a unit and differentiating. I'm also interested in understanding as a curriculum leader, when you're delivering, or when the teachers are delivering a unit of study, understanding when the unit of study is being delivered in a way that maybe is not, successful, versus you have a different group of students, and so therefore you need to go up and down, and just understanding what would trigger and result in a reevaluation of the units of study or the curriculum to say, okay, maybe this is not the right approach, or some elements of it are not working.
And those are usually decided at our USTs. So when we're sitting to go through the data at the USTs and you're noticing patterns of the performance of students across the district, you might begin to question, is there a curriculum issue? And so that might raise some questions if everybody is not performing well on certain questions that have been on that district assessment. Is there a curriculum issue? Is there an instruction issue? We're also able to then hone in on specific classrooms, or we're even able to hone in on a school. So you might say, wow, I've got really strong data over in these two schools, but now I'm looking at this and I'm noticing, something must have happened here. Did the teachers not get through the entire unit of study? Did they try to collapse something? Did they not spend enough time on these 3 lessons that should have helped them? So then you're able to dive even more deeply into the data. And it's offering the support. So, we spend a lot of time with our coaches. So, our reading coaches, our writing, our math coaches are in there, the classroom coach, and then certainly Mary and Melinda are in those elementary classrooms providing assistance as well. So it really does come back to those USTs and that benchmark data to really determine, do we have just maybe a flaw in a question? Is there a curriculum gap? Is there an instructional gap? Or is there something that may be happening in one particular class?
Got it. And then I was also hoping you could talk a little bit more about how why standards change over time, and then what that means in terms of changes to the curriculum, because I could see standards changing, but I'm interested in to what extent they change and what that means for how much work needs to happen on the CLC side to, reproduce or update our curriculum as a result of the standard changes.
So our Common Core standards have been in existence for probably, close to 15 years now at this point. And we don't foresee those changing. So you see those Common Core standards in ELA and mathematics, and those are pretty solid. I think our next generation science standards had just recently finished up with their revisions. We don't see those changing. Where we saw some recent changes in social studies actually came from some skills that teachers were actually noticing that the students weren't as strong in, for example, in geography. So sometimes you'll see a shift in standards. It's not the entire group of standards, but it might be a strand of standards. So remember when I talked about those dimensions, where we talked about geography or civics. So you might just see a strand within that dimension that has shifted, that we have to go back and just make adjustments. We're very fortunate because both Michael and Mary, Melinda, no, sorry, you're in science. Mary and Michael are really actively involved at the state of Connecticut. So they see when things are happening, and we slowly start to make tweaks and revisions so that when we're ready to go through and adopt new standards, we're kind of already in place. So some of the tweaks and revisions aren't huge.
Mm-hmm. Great. And do you see in some of, let's say, like the additional resources where you'll get input not just from curriculum leaders doing research or talking to peers at other districts, but also teachers saying, hey, I found this resource, this is useful to me, it could be useful to others. Is there that kind of a process embedded in continually updating the curriculum?
Yes, we're constantly seeking feedbacks from the people that are actually teaching the curriculum on a day-to-day basis. So whether we're meeting with them after a unit of study was rolled out to see if there's tweaks that need to be made in that unit of study, we're always asking for resources. We're always asking them to give us ideas and suggestions. We're asking them to share. Some of that takes place right even at the USTs, where you'll start to say, wow, your data in math is really amazing. Like, what did you do differently in your classroom that maybe I can try in my classroom? Because my kids really struggled with this concept, but I see that your kids really understood that concept. And that's how you get teachers to share what's happening in their classrooms. Through our coaching cycles as well, when teachers are going and observing other teachers, or if one of the curriculum leaders notices that a teacher is doing really something phenomenal, then oftentimes we'll get coverage for 2 other teachers to go over and watch a different teacher. And we do walkthroughs all the way up into high school, where they'll walk into different classrooms and observe.
Great, thank you.
Laura?
Hi, thank you, Dr. Grinty. I have a question about the assessment plan, just to use your example that you give here. And you were talking about how teachers do either like a quick exit poll or, just check-ins and assessments all the time. So when you look at a plan like this, I guess my question is, how much leeway do the teachers have to assess in their own way? And then what is universally required? Like, for example, on this bottom one, you have a grade 2 unit 1 Connecticut assessment 17. Is that there because teachers are required to administer that across the district to all students? Or is it use this example to build your own assessment?
No, so any assessments that were given that were coming together to analyze data are driven, and they're usually listed within this stage 2 of the UBD. Okay. And so they are universal assessments that we're asking kids. What sometimes happens is teachers will make quizzes along the way.
Right.
So I want to know, did my students understand these last week of math that I was teaching? And so I might give a little quiz along the way to make sure that they're understanding it. Or we just did a great lesson today, and I just kind of want to get some feedback on their way out the door. So I give them a little ticket to respond to, and I give them a little math question, or I give them something to respond to in writing, and they give me it, and I'm able to look at it and quickly assess to see if they understood it. So we have universal assessments that are part of our UBDs, and then there's always those informal assessments that teachers are doing along the way. You never want to get to the universal assessment, whether that be a unit assessment or whether it be a benchmark assessment, and not have your students perform because you weren't assessing along the way to making sure that they're understanding the concepts that are taught.
So that was my next question. What is the threshold for in a classroom saying this isn't an individual student not getting the concept, this is that the concept hasn't been effectively taught? Like, where, at what point on the threshold do we say, oh, we need the teacher to go back and redo this whole unit because the class isn't getting it? It's not just 1 or 2 students that aren't getting it.
So that I would have to say that's probably very rare that it happens because we have so many people in and out of the classrooms. Okay. But you would, if that happened at the end of a unit assessment, you would want to say, okay, how are we going to go back and spiral through? Because we're going to move on, but we need to spiral back.
Right.
And so that might be every day when they're coming in, we're doing something on place value to assure that they understand that. We're doing quick teaching of it, and then we're moving into the next concept. Teachers are doing that spiraling all the time because you always want them to remember things and recall things that they've done throughout the course of the year.
Okay. And so if a teacher has to do this spiraling, is that an instance where someone from the CLC comes in and helps support that teacher, or how do you help support that teacher to go through those processes?
Oftentimes, it's one of the curriculum leaders, it's one of the department chairs that are working through the data with the teachers to assure that they are making sure that their students are moving forward and understanding the concepts. So it's the curriculum coordinators who might work with a reading specialist, writing, or math specialist, but oftentimes they really are the experts in that curriculum, so they're able to help teachers to say, let's adjust here, let's adjust there, we can move this along to help your class to make sure that they master it. Sometimes you can pull out what priority standards that need to be taught too, and that helps to help instruct a class again.
And then if something like that were to happen, is that reflected in a teacher's TEPL, or like how do we make sure that teachers have the professional learning to not have the same thing happen the next year, or whatever not continuing that cycle?
So the professional learning happens all the time. So it's not unusual to, find Kathy Grimes in a classroom modeling a lesson. so she's now instructing. So we do kind of our gradual release model. So she'll go in and she'll demonstrate a lesson, and then all of a sudden, now we're going to do the next lesson together, and now I'm going to watch you do the third lesson. And then I might walk away, and then I might come back and see how are we progressing with that unit of study. What's really nice when you have such solid curriculum like this, even as administrators, even as myself, I can walk in any second grade classroom during a writing unit of study, and I can tell exactly where they are in the unit of study. I can say who's falling behind in their unit of study. We're never asking everybody to be on lesson number 4 on day number 4. I mean, it varies, but you can get a good understanding of where all the teachers are. And so the administrators have access to this curriculum, and that's also part of what they do through the walkthroughs. And so you'll find it really beneficial when you walk through an entire 5th grade reading and you're watching what's going on in each of the 5th grade reading classrooms, because you have an understanding, are they actually teaching to the UBD?
Great. And then just another question. So when we're looking at a social studies standards you're saying have been rolled out, about how long does it take us to integrate those new standards and put them into the curriculum, and then they get into the classroom? And I guess the second part of that is, does the state require it to be implemented in a certain amount of time, or do we have leeway in how we implement that within our curriculum, within our district? Or the autonomy, I guess, to do it on our own?
So I think you probably have more flexibility in the area of social studies, because it's not an area that's going to be assessed, to be honest. When you're talking about reading and writing and math and science, it's an area that's assessed. So if they're making changes within the curriculum, then you're going to need to make those changes as well, because you know that the Smarter Balanced, you know that the SAT, and it's all going to be aligned to those Common Core standards. We don't wait long periods of time. Like, I know already, Mary Hannah has sent me a proposal for the K-8 curriculum. Like I said, the adjustments that have to happen in elementary school are minor. We've already made some of those adjustments along the way. Like, we rolled out a new 4th grade unit on westward expansion, which was a whole way to, that the 4th grade teachers rolled out this year that the kids absolutely loved. And we know that we've got work going on in middle school this upcoming summer. And so it's adjusting those units of study.
Great. And then my last question is how often, you were talking about how the textbooks are used as a tool and not curriculum. How often do we assess, or do you guys assess the textbooks that we use? And I mean, even how critical are the textbooks? I know my kids have some, but how much do we even lean on traditional textbooks anymore?
So it really varies from course to course. We have subscriptions that come due. As a matter of fact, in June, we'll be coming forward to do a presentation to you on a new chemistry textbook that we're looking to adopt. So there's a process that we follow. The chemistry book that we currently have is older edition. It's going to be going out of print. And so at this point, we know that we needed to adopt a new textbook. So we had a choice of either sticking with the same publishing company and just getting a new edition of that textbook. But the science teachers who teach chemistry, along with Michael LeDuc and Ashley Tremblay and Michelle Ludala and Larry Sullivan, they form a team, and they really dive into a variety of different chemistry textbooks to assure that we've got the best chemistry textbook to move forward with. So we know that we have to invest the money, because the textbook that we're currently using is going to go out of print. It's outdated. Doesn't have the same kind of digital tools that some of the other textbooks have for our high school students. And so they go through a textbook adoption process. And so in June, we're actually going to walk you through what that textbook adoption process looks like. We're going to have Michael LeDuc present the 5 different textbooks that we analyzed and why we made the choice on the new textbook that we would like to purchase. So sometimes we go through textbook revisions because they go out of print. Sometimes we find that There's better digital resources. So in high school, it's not uncommon to see those textbooks, and oftentimes the textbooks stay at home because they're very heavy to carry back and forth to school, but they have access to the digital resources at school. They also have access to copies of the textbooks in the library and textbooks within the classrooms.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Penny.
I was just wondering, when you get an AP course, how does that interact with UBD? Do we create our own UBD of the AP course, or do we use the analysis that the AP, the people who developed the course put out? Or probably, if we teach 20 different courses or 28, however many, there are probably 28 different answers. I was just curious what the interaction was. And also, I wanted to thank you all for the tremendous amount of work that you do. And I forget how many collective years of knowledge and expertise it is, but you're well beyond that 100. That was in the one element that Jill discussed.
Michael, do you want to talk a little about AP?
Getting a few more steps in.
They're doing so great on the spot, aren't they?
They really are.
Hi, everyone. The College Board creates the AP program. I struggled with that word. Driven by College Board, and they create the course exam and description binders. They're pretty hefty documents that are functionally a UBD. They don't use the same language as a UBD by Wiggins and McTeague, but it's functionally the same in that we have the AP exam that we're preparing for with their standards. We have we know the assessment that they're working towards, and you have flexibility with the learning plan, but they do provide assured experiences in labs and other materials to use along the way.
Any more questions?
College Board does suggest the textbooks too.
Back to Matt. Back to Matt.
All right, so in the last 10 minutes or so, I've caught myself up on what a standard is. I think I found the U.S. high school history standard for when I'm just going to take World War II, for example. And I'm not going to quiz you on exactly what they are.
Please don't, because I'm going to need
But my question is, after reading them, I found them kind of interesting. So to what degree is the standard only what we teach, or is it with the foundation we have to check those boxes and we can teach other things around the standard?
So I think what we would go back to, so I'm not sure exactly what you're looking at, but
I
I
can
want to
give you,
make sure you go to the Connecticut social studies framework. So there are national standards, and then Connecticut adopts the national standards. And
ctsocialstudies.org?
That's probably it. Yes.
So, for instance, like FDR doesn't make an appearance here, nor does the word heroism or, Omaha Beach, D-Day, things that are actually World War II, right? I assume we teach those, right, even though they're not part of the standard. Is that right? Yes. Okay, good. Good. Because I see a lot of other things in here that are not actually World War II, but I mean, they're part of World War II, but they're not, the things we probably all kind of learned around World War II. So I'm assuming that we teach the history that around these standards that are not part of these standards. Is that right?
It's the chronological continuance of U.S. history.
Well, and also just the different viewpoints, whereas this comes at it from a certain viewpoint. I'm not going to make a judgment on what viewpoint that is, but it comes at it from a certain viewpoint. But there's other viewpoints, again, such as like the heroism of an 18-year-old climbing the mountains of, climbing the hills of Omaha Beach, right? We teach about that versus just what is sort of being laid out here, because this presents an interesting viewpoint of history.
Come on up, Michael.
So, sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious.
Michael could talk history all night.
So could I. So that's the problem. You kind of.
You said World War II standards.
That's just the one I
Could you read a brief,
Sure.
a selection so I get a sense of what we're talking
Absolutely.
about? Thank you.
So there's 5 of them. Evaluate the role of economic and political developments that created the conditions leading to World War II and the Holocaust, e.g. Great Depression, nationalism, militarism.
Okay. So
Totally legitimate, right?
Of course,
Yep.
yeah. The initial, the first half of what you just read, as you could tell, is a bit more broad, right? It's more of a larger concept, whereas the examples, the EGs, would be that.
Sure.
While we don't march through the textbook as our curriculum, increasingly with students relying more and more on the internet and all sorts of sources which we have less control over, we are using the textbook to give us baseline moments. So that we at least all have a collective set of facts that we can start talking about, discussing, thinking about.
Of course.
As far as the viewpoint, of course, education has had a certain viewpoint, perhaps things, and you can view history
Absolutely.
from all sorts of
Absolutely.
I guess to my mind, that's where the shift that Common Core had taken and where our skill-based instruction goes. I think when people think of traditional history classes as remembering names and dates, that came from a pre-internet world when people didn't have all the information in the world in their pocket, right?
Sure.
So our intent, our skill-based standards are focused more on helping people make sense of all that information, trying to work with baseline concepts like the economic causes for the Holocaust. And the specific examples, again, based in the textbook, but based, considering student ability, the rigor with which they can work, we rely on the expertise of our teachers and their degrees to present additional information, additional viewpoints, additional examples.
Sure.
Of course, you could never hit them all. But the goal through those skill-based standards really is for students to be able to develop their own conclusions and communicate those conclusions.
Got it, yeah. And again, I just found it curious.
Yeah.
Right? That I'm looking at the World War II standards and FDR is not mentioned. Omaha Beach is not mentioned, right? Like,
I assure you we mentioned them.
and that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm
of
asking,
course.
is making sure that this does not, this is not the guide that we are
No,
taking,
again,
that we're actually teaching about the war, not just
course.
about this view of the war.
Examples that they give you with the broad.
Sure, yes, okay.
It's interesting, the new Connecticut social studies standards were really a reaction maybe to the point you're making,
Yes.
which is the Common Core was much more broad. You could almost look at the Common Core social studies standards as general English standards. And the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies stepped in and said, we want to maintain the integrity of the social studies. So they included geography, they included civics,
Absolutely.
more content-specific things.
Yep.
Once you get into the more granular details, not that FDR is a granular detail, but from the lens of standards, it becomes a bit more granular. Again, we use the district-approved textbook to kind of give us our baseline of
Sure.
events, and then the expertise of the teacher to supplement that.
Okay, that's great, because again, like, you read some of these and they appear to guide you in a certain viewpoint of America in that time, right? As well as the examples that they're using are giving you sort of a hint as to where they want to go, and there's a whole other side, right?
Of course, yeah, that
what was going on, right?
That tightrope is what social studies teachers are constantly walking, and we work diligently to ensure that our, what we're presenting isn't one-sided.
Excellent.
It's a constantly evolving process, of course, and
Of course. And that's not to say that all viewpoint, I'm not saying it should only be one viewpoint. It's just, this appears to present a certain viewpoint that is leaning one way versus, again, Omaha Beach is not mentioned, right?
Right.
FDR is not mentioned. It just
Right.
struck me as odd.
Oh, I didn't write.
Anyway, thank you.
Of course.
Appreciate the presentation and everything.
And just as a spoiler alert, when you see alignment to new K-12 Connecticut social studies standards, you're going to see probably district goals. So it's once again unpacking the changes in those standards and then coming up with the process that will follow to get them written into our curriculum and then Mary and Michael will be in front of you probably next year doing a presentation. So we'll have Michael totally gear up on all of his social studies so that you can have some fun.
I look forward to it.
Thank you, Dr. Garrenti, Michael, everyone, for your work, for being here tonight, everything. Thank you, guys.
He sure can.
Sean, all set? Statement of accounts with Sean O'Keefe.
I thought I had a record turnout tonight. Okay, we're 10 months into the year. Our operating expense actual is 82.9 million, or 75.98% of our full year budget of 109.1. That 75.98 compares to the prior year of 75.92. So it's slightly better than it was last month when we saw a significant improvement. So we're 0.06 higher. Basically, we're on track to achieve budget based on the attainment rates. As of just a little bit on our process, as of May 15th, we have frozen all new requisitions or expense. We will look at any requests for expense requisitions if it's critical in nature. You know, we of course would approve it, but basically frozen right now. And we've begun the process that we do at this time every year to close out any open purchase orders and get final invoices in. On grants, year-to-date, grants to date 2.087 million. Year-to-date expenditures of 982,000, leaving a remaining balance as of April 30th of 1,105,486. And just a reminder, these are mostly two-year grants. In school lunch, revenue totals 2,351,850, or 76.2% of our budget of 3,086,504, which represents a year-to-year decrease of 3.7%, which is close to where we reported it last month. And again, the decrease mainly caused by two reasons. One is a shift in the mix of sales from sandwiches and snacks to more hot meals, which I believe to be a healthy alternative, and also a continued increase in free and reduced student roster. Last 2 months, we were about 27% increase in the roster. It edged up to 28% in the month of April, which is normal. Total expense through April, 2,175,644, or 76.4% of the full year budget, which represents a year-to-year increase of about $60,000, or 2.9%. And some of the drivers of the net increase, salaries, which are budgeted, dairy purchases, and equipment, and partly offset by decreased expense for repairs and outsourced services. Net income through April, still very positive at 176,000, leaving a fund balance as of April 30th of 1,008,713, so a very healthy fund balance. Finally, in facilities, rental and donations, facility rentals revenue 241,000, expenses 239,000, net income a positive 2,167, and a healthy fund balance of 329,000. Donations revenue 138,000 to date, expenses 209, net income a negative 81,000, and a current fund balance of a positive 97,744. And summer school revenue, not much change since last month, 125, revenue expenses 133, net income a minus 7,000, fund balance remains at 164,000. Questions?
Any questions for Sean? Erica?
Can you talk a little bit about the donation and the donation line and the net income of negative 81, if that's a timing issue or if there's an expected drawdown?
In the non-lapsing accounts, we will see, for at certain points of the year where we could have a negative balance, but it all catches up. It is in fact timing differences.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
On to the fun stuff. Board of Ed member appreciation.
Yes, well, I will show my appreciation by being succinct. But before we conclude, I do want to take a brief moment to say thank you to each of the members of the Board of Education. Your service is often quiet, sometimes thankless, but always vital to the work that we do here in the schools. You give your time, your insight, and your care to ensure that our schools reflect the very best of what public education can be for each and every student. And your dedication is impactful throughout the year, as witnessed by many throughout the very active budget season this year. I think maybe our most active and most participatory budget season in my 11 years here. Your commitment to our students, staff, and community is deeply appreciated, and it shows in every thoughtful question that you ask, every tough decision that you face, and every hour you dedicate at general meetings, at committees, and the many hours of work that you put in behind the scenes. So on behalf of our students, our staff, and our community, I want to say thank you for your steadfast support and for the trust you place in us as we do the most important work on the planet together. And as a very small token of our appreciation, each of the PTCs of PFA have put together a little bag for you. I want to say thank you to Saks for the bag. That made it a lot easier to bring everything over. And the forecast is changing, so you shouldn't need that golf umbrella anytime too soon, but you may need it on Thursday or Friday, according to the weather report that I got today. But each of the bags there are donations from our PTCs and PFA, and just our way to say thank you to each of you. You can wear the East hat around town with pride. You can put the Westy sticker on or the magnet on the back of your car if you like. Really, one of the many great things about our Board of Education is while you have some connection to one of our elementaries and the schools as you come through, or whether your children haven't gotten to those schools yet, each one of you works very, very hard to represent every child in our district. And it shows in the conversations we have, the considerations you make, and the decisions that you make and help us to implement. So it's an honor and a privilege to be your superintendent. I want to say thank you. I learn from you more often than you probably know. And it is always a pleasure to work with and alongside you. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lutzy. Comments from the public? Not tonight, okay. Announcements and future business.
Yes, hard to believe already this weekend is Memorial Day weekend. So we have our parade scheduled on Monday. The parade will begin at 9:30 from the church, and we'll be marching our way down Main Street to the cemetery where there'll be a program. If you haven't gotten back to Michelle yet to let her know if you could join us, please do. All are welcome, and I hope that we have a great crowd as we typically do for those parades. Our next regular meeting will be the next Monday, June 2nd, so 2 weeks from tonight. We'll have an update on our hiring from HR, but we'll also be honoring our CABE students, our Student Leadership Award winners, and taking some time to honor our retirees. We have 8 retirees. I believe 7 of the 8 have confirmed, and the 8th is working hard to try to change a very difficult date for her. But at least 7 will be here, along with family and colleagues, and so we'll be doing that. We also have our Model UN coming for a field trip approval, and as Dr. Krenti mentioned, we'll be talking about the science textbook as well. So lots to look forward to at our next meeting. And I do want to share that tomorrow begins our senior internship. So it's a great time to come to the high school starting tomorrow if you need a parking spot. There's lots, all of a sudden the lots are empty. But all over town, you'll see our students engaged at our central office. You'll see them at town hall. You'll see them in all different places. And I know several of you are actively involved with this program as well. And so in our next second meeting in June, we'll have an update on the program to hear how all that went from the program director. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to getting started with my senior interns tomorrow morning.
Terrific. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Matt Campbell, second. Matt Wexler, all in favor. Good night.